Back in high school, Clara was the target of cruel jokes. They called her names, mocked her awkwardness, and left scars that words alone couldn't hide. Years later, those same classmates planned their big reunion, not to celebrate, but to drag her back into the spotlight, just to laugh again. The night came. The music was loud, and whispers circled the hall. Everyone was waiting for the geeky girl to walk in. But when Clara finally stepped through those doors, the room froze. Mouths dropped, drinks slipped from hands, and the laughter died instantly. No one was ready for what they saw. High school corridors have a certain smell, cheap floor polish mixed with sweat and perfume that lingers long after the last bell. For her, those hallways felt like a battlefield. Every step was a risk, every corner a reminder. She wasn't just another teenager trying to fit in, she was the target. They called her nerd.
They called her dweeb.
They laughed at her oversized glasses, her rumpled clothes, her quiet shell. Lunch breaks were the worst. She would sit at the edge of the cafeteria, a tray of food untouched, listening to the Snickers float around. Sometimes the words weren't even whispered. Don't sit too close. Geek might rub off. Someone said that once, loud enough for the whole room to burst into cruel laughter. She swallowed her tears with every bite. But pain leaves marks deeper than bruises. She carried those whispers home, lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why she wasn't enough. Why confidence seemed reserved for everyone else. Why her reflection felt like a curse. There were days she walked with her shoulders tucked tight, as if making herself smaller could hide her from the next insult. Teachers ignored the mocking. Friends she tried to make drifted away when the teasing became too much. She became the girl no one defended. And yet inside their quiet shell, a fire was building. She watched the same guys who mocked her pose in the hallways, desperate for validation. She noticed the way they copied each other's looks, desperate for validation. Somewhere in her chest, a thought began to grow. If they think I'll stay broken, they don't know me at all. But at 17, that spark was fragile. The label geek clung to her like a shadow. Every school photo captured the same hollow gaze, chin slightly lowered, smile forced, eyes begging the camera not to see too much. Years would pass, but those scars didn't fade. They became the soil where something else would take root. And that's why when her old classmates sent her a message years later, an invitation to their high school reunion, it wasn't excitement she felt. It was the echo of every cruel word. They didn't invite her to reconnect. They invited her to remind her of who she used to be, or at least who they thought she still was. 10 years later, the message spread like wildfire through old class group chats. Big reunion. Everyone's coming back. The words had a shine to them, but the truth beneath was duller. In a cramped apartment on the edge of town, Brittany, once the head cheerleader, stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Mascara smudged under her eyes, stomach heavier than it once was. A toddler screamed in the next room, and a half-empty wine bottle leaned against the sink. She sighed, typed into the group chat. You think she'll show? Replies popped up fast. Dweeb duckling. No way. We should invite her for laughs. And then a string of laughing emojis. Meanwhile, Jake, once the cool guy everyone swore would make millions, sat in his parents' garage, surrounded by dusty cardboard boxes, his failed startup logo still plastered on the wall. He smirked at his phone as he typed, "Yeah, let's get her there. Imagine her face when she walks in." Their conversations dripped with a desperate edge. None of them were truly doing better, but mocking someone else, that felt like a lifeline. Misery loves company, and cruel nostalgia was the glue holding them together. Plans grew bolder with each message. They booked a hall, pulled money they didn't really have, bragged online about a spectacular event. In whispers, they admitted to each other this wasn't about reconnecting. This was about proving someone else had it worse. On the night of the reunion, the building buzzed with expensive perfume, cheap cologne, and the sticky sweetness of spiked punch. Old cliques naturally reformed. The former cheerleaders turned moms huddled near the bar. The former athletes, now soft around the waist, slapbacks too hard, laughing louder than necessary. And in every corner, gossip. Did you hear? She's actually coming. No way.
Swear it.
Got a confirmation. Some smirked, some rolled eyes. Others leaned in with the hungry look of people ready for a show. One woman, swirling her drink, whispered just loud enough, "Wonder if she still looks like... well, you know." Snickers followed. A couple of heads turned toward the door as if expecting her to stumble in any moment. Awkward, plain, an easy target all over again. But she wasn't there yet. Not yet. And while they polished their fake smiles and polished their glasses, none of them noticed the irony. They were about to measure her life against their own broken pieces, not realizing she was walking toward them with a story they couldn't begin to imagine. The music pulsed faintly in the background, the kind of generic playlist every reunion seemed to recycle, but the chatter was louder. Laughter echoed from the bar. Glasses clinked against each other and conversations overlapped like waves hitting a shore. Then a hush, not silence, just a kind of dip in volume when people sensed something about to happen. A few heads turned toward the entrance. The double doors pushed open. At first, it was just the faint sound of heels striking the polished floor. Sharp, rhythmic, confident, the kind of sound that made people turn instinctively, like a drumbeat calling attention. She stepped inside. For a second, no one recognized her. The light from the chandelier hit her tailored silk jumpsuit, glowing against the professional elegance that once sparked ridicule. Her hair, now in a chic, polished bob, framed a face carved with grace and power. It was her, the geeky girl. But the room didn't see a geek anymore. They saw a woman who belonged on magazine covers. Whispers fired off immediately. "Wait, who's that? Do you think that's her? No way. She looks different." Brittany's wine glass wobbled in her grip. Jake froze mid-laugh, jaw tightening as if he'd swallowed glass. A group of former classmates near the back craned their necks, squinting, whispering to each other with the nervous energy of people realizing a cruel joke had just flipped on them. She didn't rush. Every step was deliberate. Her hand brushed the clutch at her side, her chin lifted slightly, her gaze steady, not on them, but through them. She moved like someone who knew the room belonged to her before she ever walked in. And it wasn't just her appearance. It was the aura, the quiet, unshakable authority. Years of scars melted into the confidence of a woman who'd built something no one in that hall could claim. By the time she reached the center of the room, the silence was thick enough to choke on. Even the DJ seemed to pause, one hand frozen above the soundboard. In the corner, two men muttered under their breath. "She looks familiar. Yeah, like I've seen her before. Tech ads, maybe." And then, like sparks igniting dry grass, recognition began spreading. Eyes widened. Fingers pointed subtly. People leaned closer, whispering furiously. The truth hadn't yet been spoken aloud, but the tension in the air said everything. This wasn't a girl they remembered. This was someone they didn't know how to face. The whispers swelled until the air buzzed with them. One guy tugged at his friend's sleeve, voice low but urgent. "Look at the billboard on Main Street. The tech company ad. That's her, isn't it?" Her friend's eyes widened. "Oh my God, it is her."
More murmurs, more pointing.
Even the once confident Jake rubbed at his temple, muttering to himself like he could deny what his eyes were screaming. Brittany sank into her chair, clutching her drink as though the glass might keep her upright. And in the middle of the storm, she stood calm. She turned slowly, eyes sweeping across the crowd. The same faces that once spat insults, now hiding behind nervous laughter or stunned silence. Her smile was soft, controlled, the kind of smile that didn't need approval. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, low enough to command attention without trying. "You don't recognize me," she said, pausing long enough for the silence to ache. "Maybe you should. You gave me a name once. Ugly nerd. Remember?" A ripple went through the room. Shifts in chairs, throats cleared, eyes dropped to the floor. No one dared laugh. She let the silence stretch, then added with quiet finality. "But tonight, this reunion you've been bragging about, the hall you're standing in, the food, the music, every detail you're enjoying, I paid for it. My company sponsored it. And yes, your ugly nerd is the CEO you've been seeing on billboards across the city.
Gasps.
A few hands covered mouths. Someone dropped a glass, the sharp crack splitting the silence, like punctuation. And she didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stood there, shoulders squared, the weight of years lifted from her chest. It wasn't revenge. It was revelation. And that somehow cut deeper than any insult ever could. For a long moment, no one moved. The music, the laughter, even the clinking of glasses, all of it had died. She didn't need to explain further. Her presence was explanation enough. Brittany shifted uncomfortably in her chair, tugging at the hem of her dress, as if fabric could hide her shame. Jake stared into his drink, jaw tight, knuckles white. Others forced brittle smiles, pretending they were proud, but their eyes betrayed them. Resentment, envy, disbelief. And she simply turned, thanked the waiter who held the door, and walked out with the same calm elegance she had walked in with. No gloating, no parting shot, just quiet triumph. Behind her, the whispers returned, heavy with regret and realization. They had invited her back to laugh at the past, and instead they became the punchline of the night. Because the girl they mocked had built an empire they could never touch. And sometimes justice doesn't come with words. It walks in a room, stuns everyone silent, and leaves them to choke on the memory forever.